Hello, this is Sherrod with Sherrod Sports Visas, and today we're moving on to the second part of our series on P1A petitions for internationally recognized athletes. And today we're going to talk about the parts of the petition. When you're actually going and writing the petition, at our office, there's 6 parts of the P1A petition that we focus on, and that each have their own challenges and should be presented a certain way. So of the 6, the first one is the title of the athlete. And this is something we always introduce as world-class sport athlete. So, for example, it could be a world-class boxer, world-class barrel racer. And the reason we do that is to set the tone that the athlete is already internationally recognized. Now, where it can be nuanced is if the sport in itself has several components. Say, for example, in combat sports, there's mixed martial arts. We don't typically refer to our mixed martial arts fighters as world-class MMA fighters. We call them world-class martial artists. This is so that when we get to their eligibility part of, is the athlete internationally recognized, we don't just have to look at their MMA accomplishments. We can look at all their combat sports accomplishments, whether it's Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, Sambo, and other type of things. And there's other sports where this could be advantageous as well. Say, for example, in rodeo, you might do several different sports within a rodeo, like maybe you rope and you also ride bulls. So that way we would say world-class rodeo athlete instead of a world-class bull rider or world-class roper. That's because we can bring in both eligibility awards, rankings into that part of the petition when we get into eligibility later down the line, as opposed to if you just said this is a world-class bull rider, which can be very important. The next thing we get into is the structure of the petition. And this is something that's very important because based on how you present this information, there are certain third-party authorities that may or may not be necessary to do it. Say, for example, there's 3 types of structures that we typically use, and this is something that we'll get into more in depth in the series just about the structure of the petitioner. But there's direct employer. Say, for example, Top Rank Boxing gets a fighter. That fighter is going to be directly employed by Top Rank Boxing. All right. Then there's U.S. agent for an athlete. And there's 2 types of these. You can be U.S. agent for multiple employers. So that means that if you're like a fighter and you want to compete with different promotions, but you manage yourself, you would say, my visa petitioning agent is just getting my visa, but I need to get authority and letters from all these different promoters saying that I'm contracted to fight in their promotions. Then there's U.S. agent functioning as the employer. And this is one that we use a lot because if you're an agent and you're directing an athlete to go compete here, here, and here, and here, and you're directing and navigating their career, under the regulations, you do not have to get third-party authority from the places that they'll be competing. And that's something that's very important for unsigned athletes. And that's a category that we use a lot. The other category we use a lot, is U.S. agent for a foreign employer. That means, say, if I have a promoter that's in Germany, but they are using some entity in the United States just to sign the immigration papers, but they're going to be directing and navigating the career of the athlete. That's another structure where you don't need authorization from those other organizations in the United States in order to get the visa. Say, for example, and this is something that we fight with them a lot, but almost all the time it works. Say, for example, promoter A in Germany wants an athlete to come and compete in 4 different other promotions. Under the regulations, if that is articulated correctly as a foreign employer using a U.S. agent, there's no requirement under the regulations for there to be a contractual relationship with the promoters that he'll be working with in the United States. Now, that may come in under the requirements like, did you prove that he's actually going to be competing in these events if there's no contract in place, but there's other ways to show that that's more likely than not going to happen. The third part of a P1A petition is the consultation letter. Typically, USCIS wants to see a consultation letter from the governing body in the sport. However, there's a lot of sports that just do not have this, or there's organizations out there, but they don't really get involved in issuing letters for athletes. So in sports like mixed martial arts, we just explained that there is no place to go get one. In sports like boxing, USA Boxing doesn't typically issue consultation letters, and they're the regulatory body of amateur boxing in the United States. So we'll say that there is nothing available, but we'll also provide a letter from maybe the World Boxing Council or the World Boxing Association saying that they have a no objection, and issue that as a consultation letter showing that they're the regulatory body of professional boxing in the world, which includes the United States, of course. But the consultation letter is usually not a big deal. In most sports, you can kind of get around actually supplying one. You can maybe show that you ask for one and they say they don't issue it. But we'll get more into that during that series, specifically on consultation letters. Number 4, and this is the tough one. Sometimes it's tougher than eligibility. Events that require the participation of internationally recognized athletes. In this section of the petition, usually we're describing what the events are, how many people attend them, the revenue size for it, and broadcast things, and anything just to show the robustness and the cyclical nature of the events that the athlete's going to compete in. Number 5, and this is the other big one to do, and that's the eligibility of the athlete. That's when we take the 7 categories that are available under the P1A, of which we have to prove at least 2 of those to show that the athlete is internationally recognized. And then finally, we have a contract or oral consent that the whole petition is based on. So this could be, for example, a contract that you have with the NBA. It could be an oral consent that you have with a U.S. agent. It could be an oral consent that you have between your foreign employer, U.S. agent, and the athlete, showing what the athlete is going to be doing over the course of the visa period. In our practice, we like to keep the contract. We don't typically include the actual contract in our petitions. Instead, we use a oral consent that has the bare bone structure of what USCIS needs to see, because sometimes with them, less can be more. And we like to just show them what they need to know and leave it at that when we can. So those are the 6 parts of the P1A visa petition that's important to us. Number 1, title of the athlete. Number 2, structure of the petition. Number 3, consultation letter. Do we have one or do we not? 4, description of the events that will require the participation of internationally recognized athletes. 5, eligibility of the athlete, proving at least 2 of the 7 categories under the P1A regulations. And finally, 6, the contract or the oral consent that the entire petition is based on.